In this lesson, we're going to be revealing our water with a luma mat. Okay, so to get started here, I want to go ahead and just start playing around with this logo. So I'm going to double click here inside of that mantra logo comp that you see there. And I want to go ahead and pre-compose the logo that is the image separate from the logo type. So let's come down to the bottom where we see that mantra type, and we'll just shift select all of that and pre-compose it. So hit Control Shift C to pre-comp that, and we'll call this mantra logo type. And then we'll pre-compose the rest of these pieces. Just shift select all of those, hit Control Shift C to pre-comp, and we'll call this mantra logo image. Okay, so that's going to help to just kind of make that a little bit easier to read. And now if we want to, we can go ahead and go into this comp and start to break this up even further. So now I'm in the mantra logo image comp, and I am actually only going to be working with some of these blue layers for now. So we can even take this a step further by just pre-comping all of the orange pieces together. So I'll go ahead and do that now. We'll just shift select all those orange pieces. We'll hit Control Shift C, and we'll call this, let's call this mantra orange. Put an R in there. And then the blue part, I'm just going to leave out for now, but we can pre-compose that in a moment. Just so I can still see the orange with it. And I'm going to put that orange part on bottom as well. We have all the drops here. Let's just go ahead and take the stacking order of those drops and put them all together. And we'll put those beneath those blue pieces. Okay, so now I want to go through here and analyze which blue pieces I can kind of group together. And we can do that with pre-comping. So it looks to me like this is kind of a really definite piece here, but it's made up by multiple pieces. So if I select that piece, we turn off the eyeball, you can we still have this little piece right here. So I want to group those together. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Turn on the eyeball for this piece, select both of those, and let's call this far right blue. So we'll hit Control Shift C and type that in. And then let's do this middle part here. I'm going to go ahead and lock far right blue for a second. And also let's go ahead and lock all of those drops. And also lock the orange. I still want to be able to see them, I just don't want to select them by accident. So this piece right here kind of looks like this is all one as well. And then we have this little other piece here too. So let's go ahead, come in here, and just drag a box over all of those pieces. Now I don't want this piece. Let's just see what this takes away whenever we turn that on and off. Really nice. So that's exactly what I wanted to select. So let's group those together by pre-comping them. We'll hit Control Shift C, and we'll call this blue middle or middle blue, just to stay a little more consistent. And then we'll take the remaining blue pieces over here on the left, and we'll call those left blue. So Control Shift C, left blue. Okay, so now instead of having to work with, 50 different blue layers, we've narrowed it down just to these three main pieces, a middle and the two extreme sides. So I'm going to just start with this side over here on the right. So we'll be starting with far right blue, and I'm just going to solo that layer. So just hitting the solo switch over here on the timeline. And what I'm going to be revealing this with is going to be a luma mat, and it's going to be primarily composed of the video that we brought in earlier of that ink. So go ahead and grab that, and we'll drop it onto our timeline. Let's just pull this back here. And you can kind of see what this consists of. Now I'm going to make this a little skinnier. so that it just sort of fits a little bit better with the size that we see here. If you want to, you can hit the T key with that ink selected, turn down the opacity a little bit, and then we can see kind of just how those sizes look together. Let's kind of go more towards the end and see how long that ink actually gets. Okay, so pretty long. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit skinnier still. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. We're getting pretty close to about the size of that shape. And what I want to happen is for this ink to kind of come in here and reveal this shape in the way that it overlaps with it. But right now, it really isn't overlapping perfectly. So I want to use an effect on this to make it appear like it kind of follows the contours of this line. And that's going to be the liquefy effect. However, if I just drop the liquefy effect on this just as it is, we're going to have a distorted brush because we've scaled this in a way that was not proportionate. So it's a lot skinnier now than it used to be. So that's going to make it a little bit harder to deal with. So I'd rather pre-compose this ink water, and then we'll use the liquefy brush on that. So let's go ahead and turn the opacity back up to 100, and we'll go ahead and pre-compose this. So hit that ink water, just make sure you have it selected. We'll hit Control-Shift-C, and we'll just call this ink water, leave that underscore, and call it skinny, because we kind of squished it down. And you want to make sure you move all attributes into the new composition so that that scale is applied to the video itself, and the pre-comp is going to be the size of the composition, the whole thing. Okay, so go ahead and hit OK on that. And then we could actually go ahead and turn the opacity back down so we can see this better now. So I'll hit the T key to bring that up. We'll turn that down, and now we're ready to use our liquefy effect. So let's come up here, grab our, just open up Window and come down here to Effects and Presets. And then you can just type in liquefy, and that'll pop up for you. Just grab the effect and drop it onto your ink water. And now I'm just going to use this warp tool that it kind of defaults to inside of the liquefy effect to start pulling this around. But right now it's a little bit too small for me. So I'm going to go ahead and go into those warp tool options. Let's make our brush size larger and maybe even turn up the brush pressure a bit so we can really start to manipulate this around the way that we want it to look. Very nice. So you can see it really didn't take that much finessing to get that to really easily go into position. Now, I'd kind of like this at the beginning to maybe stay in that curve just a little bit better. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, we're getting quite a bit of stretching in this area here. So we can actually maybe hit that to heal just a little bit there. And then we can kind of start to manipulate this a little bit more. And if you really mess it up and you just need to start over again, you can always use that reconstruction brush just to kind of fix that bottom, or really any area that you need to fix on your comp. And sometimes actually leaving this bigger than how skinny we made it might work better for you. It doesn't really matter. It's just really your personal preference. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. That's getting pretty close to that contour of that shape. Okay, I'm really happy with that. I really like the way that that's looking and just the way that it's filling that shape up. So now what I want to do is turn back up the opacity on that. So we'll turn that back up to 100. And now I'm going to change this left blue, or excuse me, far right blue piece that we're using here so that it looks at this as a luma matte. So go ahead and we'll actually grab the skinny ink that we've created and put it just right on top of the far right blue layer. Now come down here to where you see toggle switches and modes so we can get into those track mats. And where you see far right blue, we'll select that and come over here to where it says none under the track mat column and choose Luma Matte. Now I'm going to pull this up a little bit just so you can see that. Luma Matte. And now it's basically looking at that white that we had on black earlier and only showing through the parts that are white and showing what is underneath that white. So now I can scrub through and you can see how it appears that we get this just really beautiful kind of curve here that comes on in a really, really nice way. It just feels very organic and really like a liquid or a fluid. So that looks really great. I'm really happy with those results. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll unsolo that layer. Just toggle that back up. Now it's automatically, if you've never used a matte before, it's going to turn off the eyeball on that layer, and that's normal. That's what you want. You want the eyeball to be off on the top layer, and you want it to have that little gray background with the white in the middle, and then you want the bottom one to have a transparent background icon with a black dot in the middle, and then we'll want it to say Luma over here. Okay, so right now we only have one of those animated so far, and then we also have a little bit of an issue where once this is fully revealed, it goes away once that track mat ends. So what I want to do is just a little bit into this, I want to start to add another layer that isn't using the Luma Matte to just kind of fade on and fill in those gaps and then remain there after this top one disappears. So what I'll do is we'll just grab that far right blue layer again and hit Control D to duplicate it. Now it's going to automatically put that up at the top, and we want to take it back down and move it to the bottom and make sure that one's not turned to Luma Matte, just no track map there. And now it appears that the effect has vanished, and that's simply because all of those areas that weren't being shown earlier are now being filled up by this one here on the bottom. So go ahead and open up the opacity property for this. We'll hit the T key and just turn that down, and now you can see those again. Now let's have this happen just about 10 frames from the end of whenever this pops off right there. So let's just find that last frame that it's visible, and we'll go backwards 10 frames from there. So I'm going to hold shift and hit page up to move backwards 10 frames, and then we know this is where we want this far right blue layer to begin. And I'm going to turn the opacity actually all the way down to 0. We'll set a keyframe, then we'll move forward 10 frames, and over that time we'll allow this to fade back up to 100. So we'll hold shift and hit page down to move forward those 10 frames, and then we'll turn the opacity up to 100. And then if you want to, you can actually take both of these layers that were above this one that we used for our Luma Matte and hit Alt end bracket to trim those layers, or you could just grab them from the end and drag them back to the current time indicator, and that just makes it a little bit easier to tell what's going on. And now you can see we have a really nice seamless transition, and that doesn't go away and just kind of pop off there anymore. Okay, so since I've shown you how to create this Luma Matte, I'm going to go ahead and repeat all these steps for my other two pieces that we pre-composed, for the left blue and the middle blue. So I will encourage you to practice in between lessons and do these same steps that we just did for our other two pieces of blue. But when we come back in the next lesson, I'm already going to have finished those, and then we'll be moving on to revealing the mantra letters that we pre-composed earlier. It's going to be these letters right here, and we're going to be using just that same technique. So if you didn't get it down in this lesson, you can watch the next lesson. We're going to have a very similar technique, but things are going to be just slightly different. So you'll have some more time to practice with me for perfecting your Luma Matte skills. So stick around, and we're going to learn how to reveal those letters in our next lesson.